5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Up short.
Hello everyone and welcome to a brand new episode of the One Puck Shot podcast. It is Sunday the 17th of January 2016 and as always I'm your host Ron McGregor. Kind of an Elite League special this week with media consultant Seth Bennett joining me to talk about the league's media strategy moving forward, the evolution of the Department of Player Safety and the ever controversial publication of the Elite League rulebook. So without further delay, let's jump right in with Seth. One Puck Short is brought to you in association with Eastside Hockey Manager, an in-depth ice hockey management simulation brought to you by Sports Interactive and Sega, developers of the world-famous Football Manager series, available now for PC via Steam. Joining me now on the One Puck Short podcast, a commentator and presenter for the BBC and the Elite League's media mogul. Please welcome to the show Mr. Seth Bennett. Hi Seth, how are you?
Hey, good to be here,
Great to have you on at last. You and I talk probably, most weeks, if not sort of every other day with bits and bobs and so forth. So I thought it was about time we caught up on the podcast and had a little chat about the Elite League and both the season so far and its sort of direction. So it's great to have you on.
I've got to be careful what I say now, though, haven't I? That's the problem.
Well, let's start with the sort of season so far, because Cardiff are currently top, but it seems to be one of the most open title races I can remember for several years now. And it's one of the most competitive seasons just in general, because the top 8 is by no means set. Edinburgh are still fighting for a playoff spot. So are Manchester. Obviously, Capitals lost Ryan Hayes to Sheffield today, but it just seems such a competitive season. There seems to be more parity in the league this year than, as I said, I can remember for a long time. What's your take on the season so far?
Oh, I absolutely agree with you. I mean, there's been some brilliant hockey played, some great games, so many close games as well. And, teams have lost on home ice to teams that you would expect them to beat on a regular basis.
Yeah.
Teams have gone and won away when you just haven't anticipated it. And there have been some really good news stories. The way that Edinburgh started the season was really impressive. They've got wins over all of the EIHL conference sides except for Belfast. You look at what Dundee have done after an absolutely abysmal year. Mark Lefebvre's gone in there and he's recruited a really good team. So, they're a good news story. And then you look at what Cardiff continue to do, what Nottingham continue to do, how Sheffield have continued to build on their crowd bases this season, how Braehead continue to be this terrific story with people going to watch them every single week. It's good, and it's very easy for people to sit at home and say, "Oh, this is rubbish, that's rubbish," but somewhere in the middle of all of this, there's an awful lot that is going okay, and it is making small strides forward, and hockey fans, and we're all the same. We've got our magnifying glasses out, and sometimes you need to put the magnifying glass away, go in the other room, have a glass of wine, sit down, and then go back out and look at the whole vista, and all of a sudden you realise just how much it's changed.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly there. I've never been shy to share my opinion on the state of the game in this country, and there's been several occasions where I live by the sword and die by the sword for my opinions. But that's the risk you and I both take when you stick our heads above the parapet. So
absolutely, But that's the other great part of hockey is there's always an opinion and there's always a discussion point for everybody. I mean, I've just been going backwards and forwards with one of the Braehead fans about Chris Bruton's suspension this week by the Department of Player Safety. And to me, it is the most obvious suspension to give. It's really unfortunate for Chris Bruton. He gets slightly turned on by Omar Pasha. It's a hit from behind penalty. Pasha gets injured on the play, and the rules are just it's clear cut. And as soon as there's an injury on a play that is a hit from behind, it's a match penalty, and that carries an automatic 1-game ban. But for the one guy I was corresponding with, there was an area of grey for him within all of that. He felt that it shouldn't have been that, and that's why hockey's great. Everyone's got something to say about everything.
Yeah, I'm going to use that as maybe a little segue there, because the Department of Player Safety, I don't think it's ever going to please all of the people all of the time at any level, NHL, Elite League. It's kind of the nature of the beast. But obviously you've been involved with communicating the suspensions to the wider hockey audience. And how have you felt the process with DOPS has gone, this season? I think there's positives there. It's not perfect. Nobody's claiming it is. And as I said, you're never going to please all of the people all of the time. But in general terms, it seems to be making progress. Again, it might be baby steps, but it is moving forward, I feel.
I think so. And I think that, again, having had 1 year, the first year, it was a bit rough and ready.
Yeah.
And we're all trying to figure out how best to communicate things. The reason I got involved with DOPS is the way one of the first videos was made. I just said, you need some voiceover on this.
Yeah. And
I immediately got the email back saying, well, go on then. If it needs voiceover, do it. You do it. And so I would just be sent scripts and I would do the voiceover on it. And that's how I've kind of ended up being involved in the Department of Player Safety. So sometimes it's good to just keep quiet and leave things. And now, my job is very much more, making the videos, cutting the videos, and doing all the scripting on stuff. And some of the things I think we've done very well, and I think we've got better at. And some of the things I look at it and think, we could have done that better. But that's everything, isn't it?
Yeah.
All the way through. Could I have communicated that better? Could I have said this? Could I have maybe highlighted that a little bit more? You are governed to an extent by the footage that you receive.
Yes,
and some of it is really good and some of it is less good. But the footage we receive from everybody is a lot better now than at the start of the season. So again, that's another sort of big step forward for the league as a whole. And the Department of Player Safety, I think Simon Kirkham's, he's got his head around what the job entails now.
Yeah.
And there's so much more to it than just receiving, requests on a Monday. There's an awful lot more communication that goes backwards and forwards between the clubs where, they're talking about things, and there have been times when he's just said to them point blank, do not put that in because you're going to waste your time and money. And then it's been up to the teams, of course, whether or not they did it.
Yeah.
And he can explain that to them. And I hope, my feeling with this is that you've got to hope that it's going to expand again onto the next level. Of course, everything is always governed by time and money. So there's never enough money to buy enough time to be able to do things. So, it is ever so slightly... I think it's always going to be slightly hamstrung by that. But the other side of that is, I think we're telling people now in a better way what's going on. We're trying to be a bit more transparent. Yeah. And then that allows you a little bit more leeway, I think. When people feel that you're trying to do things right, when things occasionally go wrong, and, from a Department of Player Safety perspective, seeing Tyson Marsh's ban quashed pretty much, or reduced.
Yeah.
That some people will see that as the Department of Player Safety getting a bloody nose, But the other side of that is, well, actually, the Department of Player Safety makes a decision, and on the opinion of the group, they were to a man in agreement as to what the penalty should have been,
right,
and what the punishment should have been. That gets overturned by an appeals panel. Well, that happens. They maybe saw something different. They had a better case put to them by Cardiff as to why they felt it should be reduced. But that's part of the nature of it, isn't it? It's like everything else. You might not like what's at number one in the charts, even though you've done everything within your power to try and get it there. But in the end, if everybody else kind of outvotes you, then you just got to go back and start picking again what you think is going to be the best thing. And that's what they do. They can only do what they see as being the right thing.
Yeah. I don't know if you're the right person to speak of this as such, Seth, with regard to DOPS, but I know when the Marsh hit happened and obviously Cardiff appealed the ban, the most similar situation I could find happened a couple of weeks prior to that incident. It was in the NHL, and it was Colorado captain Gabriel Landeskog, an almost identical hit on Boston's Brad Marchand. And it couldn't have been closer, given the nature of sports where no two incidents are ever the same and all this stuff. And Landeskog got a 2-game ban. Now, in situations like that, would Cardiff be able to cite other similar incidents in other leagues as part of their appeals process?
They may try, but actually part of the appeals process is not necessarily using what other bans, whether it's bans in our league or other leagues. You know, the appeals process is whether or not the facts, basically, that were given by the Department of Player Safety were correct or not. As far as my understanding is of this, because I wasn't at the appeals process. Yeah. So I think they can argue that they thought it should be less because there was body contact first, there was shoulder-to-shoulder contact, and then try and prove that. Yeah. So essentially what they had to debunk was the view that it was a hit to the head, which I think to a degree they did successfully. You know, what they said was it was a hit eventually to the head, but it was an accidental contact or an incidental contact, whichever way you want to see it. And that then meant that, you know, primary point of contact was the shoulder, but it went on to take the head afterwards. You can then argue whether or not you think that that's worth 2 games or whether it's worth 5 games. To me, I thought it was a dangerous play. I thought 4 or 5 games was probably about right.
Yeah, I mean, I was surprised it was reduced on appeal as well. I think a lot of people were, but it's, again, DOPS is never going to please all of the people all of the time, and that's the nature of the beast.
But you know what, we could have this, you know, disciplinary discussion about Frank Dempster, you know, in the early 90s when he was in charge of it. Nobody will ever agree with the guy that's saying, yes, you should be banned. You know, there's no way you're ever going to get sort of 100% backing for that, unless it's just a ridiculous situation like the helmet throwing incident last year. Yeah. But even then, people said the ban was too big, so, you know, whatever.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things we've mentioned a couple of times is, you know, attempts to improve communication with fans and be more open. And I do think there is serious progress being made there, given how closed the league and even the sport in this country has been in the past. One area that frequently comes up, and maybe it touches back to what you said earlier about Chris Brunton and what's in the rulebook there, is that the Elite League rulebook isn't online. Now, is this something that has been discussed, is to publish that Elite League rulebook, or even just the differences the Elite League uses compared to the EIHL rulebook? So these things are out there, because kind of, again, today there's people questioned what happened with Ryan Hayes, Edinburgh and Sheffield. Now, unfortunately, you know, it was sad to see the Steelers feel like they had to tweet out saying this was all above board. You know, that saddened me that they felt they had to put that out there because people were questioning whether they tapped up Hayes or something underhand had gone on at the board meeting yesterday. You know, this kind of stuff, that again, it kind of brought back to that question. It is, does some of this stuff need to be there? You know, kind of like the NHL CBA is there, and if people want to search it and really dig into it, they can. It's all written down, it's clear, there's no arguments, and in situations like this, you can just say, you know, cite Section 1, Paragraph B, this is the rule, there you go.
Yeah, I think, you know, undoubtedly, the actual playing conditions and the playing rules are something that we definitely want to get online. The reason it hasn't happened yet is one of the jobs I have to do. Yeah. And unfortunately or fortunately, there's been lots of other things going on that in many respects I feel have been more important, or certainly more immediate, maybe not more important, to require time and attention. And it's a huge job because what you've got to do, it's not just sticking in the EIHL rulebook, which for the majority of the EIHL rulebook is massive.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But then the EIHL casebook is like 5 times as big. And then the Elite League casebook is relatively chunky, but it's just about making sure you get everything right. And in truth, it's probably a summer project when everything else has calmed down, and actually you can focus your time on getting it right. Because and this is the thing that people sometimes maybe don't appreciate, and I'm sure I wouldn't appreciate. Once you're doing something like this, you have to get it absolutely 100%. You know, there isn't any grey area
No,
when
absolutely.
it comes to doing this, because if you make one mistake, and it's so easy to do with documents like that, when you're pulling things across and you're merging two documents, and particularly certain areas. I mean, the biggest difference that is to do with fighting between the two rule books, the IIHF and the Elite League rule book. If you happen to leave in one paragraph that all of a sudden blurs the lines, then all of a sudden you make a rod for your own back, because the only thing worse than not having the rule book there is having a rule book there and then changing it as things start. So I think in reality, looking at the amount of work over since I got involved with the Elite League, which was at the start of October, looking at the amount of work which is available to me between now and the end of the season, I think in truth that's a job for May or for June. Once they've had the board meetings, decided what any new rules will be for next season, and then it's probably a week-long job to sit down and make a document which is, I don't want to say bomb-proof, but certainly will help guide people in the right way. I mean, the good news is all of the teams have the IIHF rulebook and they have the Elite League casebook.
Yeah.
And again, we could put both of those online in 5 minutes. But I just don't feel it's helpful having an area of confusion where, well, hang on, what are we working off here? You know, is it this or is it that? Or why is it this or why is it that? And, you know, I go back to the magnifying glass. It's sometimes it doesn't make life difficult, but the fact that people are so passionate about our sport, they want as much information. They want more information and they've got more time than you as well. It seems to be involved in all of this, and everything is analysed down to the finest of detail. So if we it's not if we're going to do it, when we do it, it just has to be right. And once you've done it once, it's easy. Yeah, you know. And the frustration from the outside for me is, why the hell wasn't it done last summer? Truth is, there was nobody to do it. It's a job that nobody wants to do because everybody realizes what a pain in the backside it is. Unfortunately, as somebody whose job it is to communicate, I think I've been landed with it.
Short straw, yeah. I mean, as you said, it's almost impossible in a sense to make it completely bomb-proof. You just have to kind of do the best you can. You look at the NHL rulebook even. Yeah. And the general managers can't agree on what goalie interference is. Yeah. And we've seen several goals recalled because of the coach's challenge on goal interference, and the goalie community are all, well, what is and what isn't, and you see certain instances that aren't called, others are, and nobody really knows, and that's the difficulty any league faces, even the best in the world.
Yeah. And, you know, that's the difference. And I was reading a great article about the Department of Player Safety, and you're talking about, you know, by the looks of the article, 10, 12 people that are working on it on a nightly basis. Yeah. In truth, we have Simon Gerkham, me, and Chris Ellis at the other side of it, where we come up with the press releases, the videos, the scripting, and then Simon has his panel that he sends stuff out to. But that's it, you know, really. And it's a completely different, when you realise that's the level, you know, to make one of those DOPS videos probably takes an hour and a half. Yeah. And that's when you've got all the information in the video, let alone, you know, kind of having to search around and have we got another angle of that? Can I clean up the picture a little bit? And a lot of that is trial and error, because you're trying to work out, well, can I get a good enough quality zoom on this to make a difference? Or do they have another camera within the rink which can help support our argument? Because that doesn't necessarily always come in firsthand, you know, the first time. So you've got the original footage, and then you look at everything else. So it's a big thing, but it's something I think has helped the sport. I'm undoubtedly biased because I'm on the inside of it, and there are coaches that tell me that on a regular basis. But I think it does give a level of clarity. You know, if a player now just got a 5-game ban and there was no explanation, people would be up in arms. How can you give him a 5-game ban without explaining why?
Yeah, I mean, I've been heartened by what I've seen from Dops. I don't always agree, and again, we're never going to always agree all of the time because that's the nature of the beast. But you know, I broadly speaking see it as a positive for the league and something which is evolving. Whether it's getting there slowly or quickly, it is at least going the right way.
I mean, I suppose the bonus is at least the players this year have given us plenty of chances to try and get it right.
That's true. That's very true.
I suppose just to kind of wrap that up a little bit is, in the end, what you're hoping for is a weekend where you don't have any Dops at all.
Yeah. You can dream, Seth. You can dream.
We've not had many of those. No. I don't think.
Again, that maybe that's the nature of the game because it's played on such a fine line that things do spill over occasionally, unfortunately. But we've mentioned a couple of times about the footage used, not just for Dops, but also in other media outpourings that are coming out of the Elite League now. Not just in terms of the quality of the video you're seeing coming in from the clubs, but just the general usage. We had the Ask Todd Kelman session yesterday following the board meeting, which seemed to go down well. And again, I think that's a positive to have those kind of opportunities to speak to someone as respected as Todd Kelman, because at the end of the day, he is respected within the sport here. There are others whose opinions are frequently aired, but who maybe don't carry that kind of same respect as Todd does. So that was, great to see somebody of that ilk answering basically fan questions, because that's how you source them, and that seemed a real positive.
Well, it's a difficulty. It's going back to this transparency thing.
Yeah.
You know, essentially, the Elite League boardroom is a pretty boring place, with all due respect to the guys that are in there.
Yeah.
You know, they sit there and they talk an awful lot about logistics.
Yeah.
And about this, that, and the other. How are we going to make this work? How's that going to work? And then everybody's, we need more transparency. We need to know what's going on with our league.
Yeah, I think.
But actually, there's a certain amount of information which is absolutely no problem and should be. There's no problem with making it public. But how do you do that in an interesting way? Yeah. Also, at the same time, some things need to be kept within the boardroom until you come to a resolution on them. Which again is another kind of important thing, is working through, because it might be they've been working on 2 or 3 options for television going forward.
Yeah,
but you could come out in October and say, well, we're really close to getting this to happen, and then it doesn't happen because it turns out on that day the TV channel's got something that they're already committed to.
Yeah.
But you don't find out for 2 months because you're kind of going back and forth, and then everybody says, "Well, it's rubbish. It's rubbish." So you're kind of in a really hard situation. So one of the things I thought immediately was, well, what can we do that communicates what's gone on, in a way that's not boring? And generally, Todd's an interesting guy. And although most of the time he struggles to remember what's going on in the boardroom, so you have to spend a lot of time. Todd, do you remember this? Yeah. Okay, yeah. And I'm not in the boardroom for the whole of the meeting either. I'm for the bits that are relevant for me, I'm there. Otherwise, I'm busy off doing some proper work. Yeah. So it's because in truth, it would be a waste of my day to be there for much of that, because it doesn't concern me. It doesn't matter until they've agreed something, and I need to tell everybody else, and then they tell me, okay, here's the information we want to get out, and I figure out how to do it. So the Ask Kelman thing was good in the respect that it allowed people to have those things that upset them, that we would probably forget to talk about, or I may not remember to talk about. So that was a very easy way of doing it. We also did a little 5 or 6 minute interview of the 3 or 4 key things that they spoke about during the course of the meeting as well. So it was kind of a 2-pronged thing. But rather than putting out, a typed up sheet that appealed to maybe a dozen people who get to the end of it, let's try and find a way of being accessible. Let's try and find a way of being open, that people can say, yeah, you know what, I figured out what's going on. It took me 6 minutes.
Yeah.
Rather than in the end there being a battle between, 4 or 5 different people who eventually had managed to read all the way through to the end of the rather long document, and then arguing over the fact of whether one of the words was spelt rightly or wrongly, and the fact that grammatically it was all over the place. So you've got to try and get not the easy wins, but I think you've got to try and cater for the vast majority and not the minority.
Yeah, no, I'd wholeheartedly agree there. And I think sometimes some people who are quite vocal within the sport forget that they are already heavily invested in the sport.
Yeah.
So where they may look for this very finite amount of detail, which, I can perfectly see their point and I would back it up, because it's nice to have that real fine detail available as well. But equally, you need to make it accessible for everyone. The more even somebody who comes to watch Nottingham every week, but is very much a casual Panthers fan, it's got to be something they can digest easily. And as you said, it's no good throwing text at people all the time, because nothing's more boring than just a white sheet full of text, no matter what the subject is.
Well, there was a wonderful article, absolutely brilliantly written article on the BBC Sport website. There was a bit of research into where they got, and I don't know how many words it was, but it was an awful lot of paragraphs. And you had about 100% take up on the first 6 or 7 paragraphs.
Yeah.
For every paragraph after that, you were losing 15 to 20%. About 3% of everybody reading got to the end.
Yeah.
Which just, it kind of highlights all of our attention spans are somewhat limited. So how can you do things? I also think of my mum and dad, though. My mum and dad have watched hockey for a very long time. They've been Steelers season ticket holders since the 3rd season. And I think about them. For them, they're kind of interested in what's going on during the week, but not. My dad's policy is kind of, once the playoff finals are over, he kind of takes a vague interest in what's happening over the summer. But, he's pretty sure that whatever disasters the Steelers go through in the summer, there'll be somebody there that he'll turn up and watch in September. Yeah. And I think it's very easy to forget that there are an awful lot of people who are like that, who, know what? They turn up, they enjoy it, they love their hockey as much as you and I love our hockey, but they're just not gonna waste as much time as you and I do during the week on getting excited about stuff that just isn't applicable to them. They life goes on.
Well, obviously, we mentioned the videos with Todd and yourself and Chris Ellis are doing the Elite League podcast, which has just gone to iTunes as well, which is good news for me, because that's what I normally use. So,
that took time as well.
Yeah, that's strange. I don't think people always realise how long it can take to get through the iTunes vetting process sometimes. You
know what? The biggest problem was with it? It was the picture size. And I've got to be honest, every podcast I've ever been involved in previously has been BBC, and you use completely different formats to do that. Yeah. So I'd never actually gone through the process of putting something live. Anyway, eventually, when I got 20 minutes the other day, I sat down and I thought, right, need to figure this out. Well, I've got 20 minutes, figure this out. And it just turned out the picture on the SoundCloud page was the wrong size. Yeah. But when you're just trying to work through, like, well, why is this not working? Then all of a sudden you change the picture, it all works. Win.
We diverted slightly. Really, what I was sort of pushing towards, as I said, we've got the podcast, we've got some of the videos with Todd and Dops and others that go out. Where are you hoping to sort of take the Elite League in a media sense? Are there any projects you're hoping to build over the next sort of few seasons, or are there any stretch goals you've got for, say, 3 or 5 years' time? What's the sort of both the short and the long-term plan for the work you're doing with the league?
Well, I think the short-term plan for me is, behind the scenes, there's been an awful lot of infrastructure change for the website. From the old website to the new website. I suspect that's going to change again in the summer to a different provider. Yep. So the short-term goal for me was to try and improve the content on the website, which I think we've done. I think we've started to have, there are things now you can expect from the Elite League website that you will get on a daily, weekly basis. Yeah. Which, is huge. If we can do that and we can build on that, that's absolutely fantastic. The other things that I kind of want to look at in the longer term now is, pictorially, we've managed to come up with a way that all of the photographers from the 10 clubs feed into a central pool. Mm-hmm. All of those photos are now available to the press, to the 10 clubs. and to the Elite League as well. So now all of a sudden we've got this stock, if you like, that we can start to think about of pictures, which is just fantastic. So all of a sudden you've got a story. You can go back, oh, that game, yeah, I was looking today for some Ryan Hayes stuff. Yeah. Right, well, he scored in that game and he got this. Let's see what we've got. And you can take it. So there's a great picture of him fighting. Like, was it potentially David Ling that we used because he's likely to make his Sheffield debut against Nottingham on Saturday? Which I know I would have spent ages searching for that kind of thing previously and just had no chance. So my next aim now is to do something similar for video. So we're going to have all of the video in one central place. So we have a better archive rather than just searching YouTube. And then sort of hand in hand with that, it's about trying to get the clubs to turn around their video faster. Yeah. And the idea being that once everybody, or a good selection of the teams, are turning around their video fast enough, we can start to offer that out to news agencies, to the newspapers, and of course to Sky Sports News, BT Sport, in a format that is good enough for them to be able to use it. Because my belief is that ice hockey is one of those perfect 5 to the hours for Sky Sports News. A couple of good goals and a scrap, they would enjoy that a lot. And we've got to understand what we are. We're a minority sport. That's not a bad thing. Yeah.
Is that maybe part of the issue? It's something I've spoken about before, and I guess was quite vocal about when Didi had his little clash with Danny Stewart a couple of weeks ago. It is hockey trying to find its identity in the UK and embrace what it wants to be, where, does it want to embrace the rough and tumble side, shall we call it, or does it want to embrace the more finesse side? Is it just a case of kind of maybe finding our place in the sporting landscape in the UK?
Well, if you look around that arena I'm going to be at the Sheffield Arena on Saturday night, and there's going to be probably 7,500, 8,000 people there. Every single one of them has got a different reason why they turn up on a Saturday night. Yeah. And I think that as a league, what we try and do is cater for everybody in that respect.
Is that the best way forward, though, for the league, do you think, to try and be this everyman type sport? Because, the people who go to the Steelers regularly will probably go whether you play Taylor Swift or Metallica. That core, it's things like that people talk about. Is what music do you play? Do you try to appeal to the kids and get them sort of bopping along, or do you want something a bit more contemporary that maybe late teens, early 20s who've got a bit more disposable income can get behind and interest them a little bit more, and you hook that demographic in rather than...
Well, I think it depends where you are. I think, I think if I was in charge of the Manchester franchise, there is no way I would be playing anything in the build-up to face-off that wasn't Manchester scene. When I was covering a game at Rochdale, there was a steady diet of, for want of a better word, Britpop in the build-up to kickoff. And it was absolutely brilliant. Yeah. You're listening to Sally Cinnamon. It's just like, or Fool's Gold or whatever. There's so many of these wonderful tracks. But, they've got to be playing the likes of Oasis. They've got to be playing some Ian Brown in Manchester, because that's kind of what the city's about. And as somebody who lives there now, I kind of get it a little bit more. There is a swagger about Manchester as a place, and the people there understand and almost expect that. And so I think maybe you look at trying to cater in very different ways. From a media perspective, you've got to embrace the fact that we're different. Yeah, we are different. We're a bunch of weirdos because we're not football. And in truth, hockey's not a great TV sport.
No, well, I think you and I could do a whole other complete podcast on that subject. And I got absolutely flamed when I said I didn't think it was a good TV sport on Twitter. Nah, absolutely flamed. I fell out with Aaron Murphy over it.
Yeah, the thing is, what you're asking a TV camera to do, unless you've got one of the great big, 35 grand, huge lens cameras that they use at the football, that they use in the NHL, it's almost impossible to do it really, really well. Because you're asking, this camera to pick out a puck on a white surface in an arena where you've got a load of good lights, hopefully. And you're actually asking the technical bit of kit to do something that is stretching it right to its very, very limits. Then on top of that, you're hoping that the person at the other end has got a decent enough TV that they're going to be able to see it in quality. And it's hard. I think you almost have to train yourself to be able to watch hockey well on the TV. It's difficult not just to be like it, or just to be somebody that surfs across it and immediately is, understanding what's going on out there and finds it easy to see the puck. Doesn't mean that people won't engage. I think it is a hard TV sport to do well, and it's expensive because you need your 6, 7, 8 cameras, and then your costs spiral massively.
Yeah.
On that.
And I mean, this is the point I made, really. I don't think it's a great way to hook in new fans. I think the best bet is to get them in the arena because, as you said, it's not easy to follow the puck. It's better now we've got HD, but traditionally it wasn't easy. And Jeff Marek said the same thing over at Sportsnet in Canada. You've got a big white backdrop, effectively, to everything. And white is one of the worst colours you can possibly have on TV. And you've got a big white surface, one team's wearing white jerseys, and you're following a small black dot around. And the point I made was that existing hockey fans have kind of learned how to follow a game.
Yeah.
They've learned to follow where the players are going because, even if they've lost the puck, if the players are going that way, I kind of get a drift that the puck's going to be around there. And, if the whistle goes, you know what to look for. Whereas new fans are just like, what? And it's just a frenetic mess. And again, I got absolutely hammered by some people for saying that, but I stand by it, and I will fight that same cause every time.
100%. And, as a guy who's done hundreds and hundreds of hockey games on the radio, hockey's a great radio sport, by contrast.
Yeah.
Because you always know where the puck is. You never can't see the puck on the radio. And that's one of the kind of interesting things that Simsy and I sit down and we talk about this quite often, about the fact that, in some respects, the webcasting thing now has kind of gone beyond this. But we always talked about the possibility of streaming every game live, but on the radio or on as an audio form rather than a video form.
I used to listen to NHL games on the radio in the late 90s, early noughties.
Yeah, and he's brilliant. When you hear the voices of some of those guys, Kenny Albert, who calls all the Ranger games on the radio, it's brilliant. And I still get, the hairs on the back of my neck. And I'm a radio nerd, so there's no surprise to this. But there is something great about following a game on the radio. It takes you back to a different place, maybe in your life, or it takes you back to a different time where your imagination has got to be as much part of what's going on as anything else.
Yeah.
But, I think that's kind of one of the problems we face. So we do have to, going back to the original point, embrace the fact we're a little bit different.
Yeah.
Embrace the fact that sometimes crazy things happen at our games. Like a player gets kicked out and he jumps on the plexiglass and throws a punch at another player it's different. It's eye-catching. And sometimes you just, when people watch Speedway, for example, or they watch Formula One, some people tune in to watch the crashes.
Yeah.
Some people tune in to watch the racing. What you can be sure of, though, the guys that turn up or tune in to watch the crashes, one day will gradually start to levitate over to the other side, if you like, and be more interested in what's going on. And it's about finding those access points. And, from news media, and, I sit in the newsroom on a daily basis, what's the hook for getting people interested in what we're doing? And to a certain degree, I'm not too bothered if right now the only time they show the Elite League, it's fighting. If you manage to get on Sky Sports News, well, you're finding a different audience, and you're starting to build your brand slowly but surely. If they're showing something, and there is something there for them to show every time they've got a gap, or they're looking around for some material, well, better that they show the Elite League, and then all of a sudden from just showing the scraps, they might show a few goals, or they might start to take a bigger interest. And watching Sky Sports News might be our next league sponsor. or might be our next TV partner, or might be the executive that decides, actually, why aren't we doing this on a regular basis? This is brilliant. And that's kind of my viewpoint. And it's not quite as simple as any media is good media, or, any publicity is good publicity.
Yeah, for sure.
But when you've got a chance to get other people to talk about us, that's not a bad thing.
Yeah. Unfortunately, Seth, we're starting to run out of time. So
sorry.
No, it's fine. No, it's been a great conversation, and I mean, you and I could go on for quite a long time. Unfortunately, it's the situation I'm bound by with my podcast host more than anything, which has cut me short a few times, unfortunately. But I'll ask you one last question, and whether you want to answer this as Seth Bennett of the EIHL or Seth Bennett, the hockey fan, is up to you. But if you could change one thing within British hockey moving forward, what would it be?
Really good question. I think the one thing that I would change would be, this is me talking as a hockey fan. I think the one thing I change is the EPL.
In what respect?
I don't feel it is the best place to get our juniors to a senior level. I think it's become a retirement league rather than a development league. And I say that from a slight position of ignorance, because I don't watch an awful lot of EPL. But the EPL hockey that I have seen doesn't do the job that it's there to do on a regular enough basis. And I know, speaking to players who've dropped down from the elite level to EPL level, that they don't feel that it's the answer either for getting players ready to play at an elite level and to be national team ready as well. So I was very much in favour of an under-20s league that allowed overage players. I thought that would have been a really good solution that would go on to change the EPL and to change the development system in the UK. So you had the very best players playing at the highest level from 16 upwards, with not completely losing the experience of a Jonathan Weaver, for example, or a David Longstaff over the last couple of years. Those guys could stay and work on the junior development. I think that would have been a huge step forward for us. And I think that, that there is a point when sport doesn't become for all, and we don't have to cater for everybody. You have to try and develop the best kids that you have available to you in the country. And if that means that some miss out, well, that's kind of sport. It's the survival of the fittest, isn't it? The very best players will get the opportunities, and the less good players maybe have to go and play rec hockey or maybe disappear away from the game. So I think that would be, for me, if I ever was lucky enough to hit the jackpot on the Euro Millions, one of the things I would look to do would look to take over a league rather than take over any individual club. And then I'd look to set up an under-20s league where every team had an affiliation to an elite level team. And then every club at elite level, I would give some kind of financial incentive for them to take on 16 to 18-year-olds and look to have the kind of situation where you pick the best 16-year-olds for your club and they play under 20s, they train with you, but also they're working towards an education at the local college that you will do something hand in hand with them. Because the problem is, once you get to 19, you get to 20, you can't play for 50 quid a week. Yeah. Because you've got bills to pay, and unless mum and dad's looking after you. I think that's where the focus for the sport has to change. We have to look to see how we can get our 14-year-olds on the ice more, our 16-year-olds on the ice more, but our 16-year-olds getting the best possible coaching at the highest possible level. And looking at what Frölunda do, these guys have a regimen, they have an eating regime, they have the way that they train, that they do all this off ice stuff, they do all this on ice stuff 12 months of the year, and these are the really important things. So there's no short answer, I'm afraid, but I think a whole change to the structure of British hockey would be the only way to do it.
Yeah, well, I don't necessarily disagree. Certainly, the affiliates point. And I've made this point many times on Twitter that I think even within the current setup that there's room to set up those affiliations. But Seth, thank you very much for joining me today. We've been talking about catching up for a couple of weeks now, so it's great to finally have you on and go over a few of the things with the Elite League and the British game in general. So thank you very much for your time.
Anytime.